In this video, I really want to talk about the good old Carolina rig. The Carolina rig is still such a phenomenal bait that really gets bites when it gets really, really tough out there. And I have seen, even as far as like this year, this rig outperforming a lot of the newest, latest techniques. Things like jig head minnows, which are obviously all the rage. This thing still catches a lot of fish, and definitely in late summer, it is a big, big deal. Now, in this video, I'm gonna give you a few tips when it comes to fishing the Carolina rig. Now, before we do, this video is brought to you by Fin Fishing Apparel. And at Fin Fishing, I have a number of products. I have USA made sun shirts, duck hats that are waterproof, shorts. I have all different kinds of products. And right now for the month of August, for about another 2 weeks, I am running a huge giveaway. For every dollar that is spent over at Fin Fishing, you get an entry into this giveaway where I'm giving away 8 different prizes. I'm giving away 7 bait cast rods. These are rods that I've used in the past. I was gonna sell them, but I'm just going to give them away. And then a brand new Gravity 2 reel by Arc, an awesome reel. Also, any purchase made in the month of August gets a free mystery lure of some sort. And if you purchase a USA made sun shirt, you will also get a free net gator, the bass mask. So a lot of free stuff going out the door right now, and shopping at Fin Fishing is surely the best way to help support this channel. So I greatly appreciate all of you who have done so in the past. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Sea Rig, the good old Sea Rig. There is nothing more old school than probably a Carolina rig. Like, this thing has been used for so many years, and it is just such an effective bait. And really, I want to talk quickly about why this thing is so effective. And the biggest reason is that it allows you to fish a weightless bait in any water depth that you want. You can fish it in 35, 40 foot of water. And that weightless presentation is just so natural to a bass that there are a lot of times where this will outperform a lot of baits that you might fish kind of in that depth. You know, jigs, you know, big football jigs or big Texas rigs, any of those type of lures, this can outperform it. And I've seen it do it a number of times just because, again, it is a weightless presentation down there in really, really deep water. The other thing that I really like about a Carolina rig is really it's kind of like a finessey way of fishing, but you get to do it with big tackle. You know, I'm using 20-pound mainline. I'm using typically a 14 or 15-pound fluorocarbon leader. But let's go ahead and actually talk a little bit about the rig itself, because there are some really big keys to this rig, some things that I have found out over the year that just make everything a little bit better. Now, the first thing I really want to start with is this weight right here. Dude, a number of years ago, I was talking to my buddy about a Carolina rig, and I literally had this idea in my mind. I said, dude, if someone could take a tungsten weight and somehow attach one of those straws that you stir coffee with, that was my idea at the time, to it, it would be awesome, because there's a lot of us guys, especially in the northern part of the country, or even in the south where you're dealing with a lot of just rock, that part of the line that sits in front of the weight right here typically gets really, really shredded, especially when you're around zebra mussels. But even when you are fishing around rock, that is the #1 weak spot in this thing. And I thought, man, if you could put a straw into a weight, it would really protect that line. And guess what? Ryugi, a company, Japanese company, did something very, very similar. Now, they made also a kind of a change to the design of the weight itself, but I'm telling you what, this weight is the deal. Like, I'm not sponsored by Ryugi, but this weight is the deal, especially, again, if you live where you're fishing around a lot of zebra mussels, a lot of heavy rock, this sucker is the freaking deal. It also comes through grass and wood really well, which is great. So that's awesome. The other thing that is really important to understand about the weight is always try to go with the lightest weight that you can get away with that still gives you good bottom contact. You know, I think when I grew up, I always heard about people using a 1-ounce weight. Like, that was the deal. Use a 1-ounce weight on your Carolina rig. Now, there are some situations where I use a 1-ounce weight. I would say that I use a 5/8 to 3/4 ounce weight most of the time, because I can get away with it. And I think that having a lighter weight down there, I just feel like I like it because it gets hung up less. If you use a 1-ounce weight, it's great, but if you're in 10 foot of water, you're going to get hung up a lot more than not. So it doesn't really affect the action of the bait. But what it does allow you to do is be more efficient out there on the water as far as getting that stuff through the cover. So try to get away with the lightest weight that you can get away with to help you to not get hung up constantly down there on the bottom. Now, the big thing that I've done over the years is I always add a bead. That's pretty standard when it comes to a Carolina rig. Again, something that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me growing up and still doesn't make sense to me, but I always heard people say like, oh, the bead is going to protect your knot. And I never really understood that because the beads are either a hard plastic or a glass. So if you have the weight of your weight hitting up against the bead and that bead is still hitting up against the knot, you're not really doing a whole lot of protection there. So what I started to do a number of years ago now is actually just add a bobber stop. If you can see right there, I put a bobber stop between the knot and that bead and then the weight. So that is truly a cushion between your bead and your weight and the knot itself. That alone has saved me a lot of fish because back in the day when I used to fish a Carolina rig, I would break off at this knot. Not often, but I would do it every so often. And I knew it was because that weight is just taking a beating, that knot is just taking a beating from a 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce weight. So that helps out a whole lot, very simple to do. Now when it comes to the swivel, don't have a whole lot to say about that. You know, like I use a standard barrel swivel. And then let's talk a little bit about your leader. Now, I would say that most of the time I fish a Carolina rig, I like to have about a 30-inch leader, somewhere around 2.5 foot. This one's a little bit longer, probably closer to 3.5 foot on this one. But mostly that's because I usually start with I just tied this one up the other day, and I usually start with one that's about 36 to 40 inches. And that way, if the line gets a little jacked up, I can cut it down a couple of times until it gets to about that 2.5 foot range, which is about like that, before having to retie my whole leader back on. So the big thing with the leader is I just don't want it to be too short. I think that sometimes you can get away with it being too short. Like you could have a foot-long leader and still catch fish. I do like there to be some separation there. I think it just gives this a little bit more free action back there. It makes it look a little bit more natural on the water. So that's the big deal. Now the other big thing with the whole system is the hook. This is a hook that I've actually recommended quite a bit here recently, but this is a Gamakatsu G-Finesse hybrid worm hook. So the thing that I like about this is, one, it is a very light wire hook. When it comes to Carolina rig fishing, you want to get away with the lightest wire that you can get away with. The lighter wire you get away with, the more natural your bait is going to look. If you go with a real heavy hook, it's just going to weigh that thing down. It doesn't look quite as good. So you can literally see this by testing it out, throwing it in the pond or lake right beside you and dragging across the bottom. You will see how much better it looks with a light wire hook. So that G-Finesse hook I really like. Also, it's in like an EWG style hook, but it's a hybrid hook, where you can see there's still good hook bite here, probably over 1/4 inch. I don't like the EWGs, you guys know this, that come right back in line with kind of your eye. To me, those are just going to lead to issues, and it definitely leads to issues when fishing it on a Carolina rig. So that little guy right there is what I like. And I'm gonna use, this is a 3/0. I'm gonna use a 3/0, a 4/0, a 5/0, or maybe even bigger depending on the bait that I am fishing. Now for me, when it comes to the bait, there's really only a few that I like. You know, if I'm fishing around a lot of smallmouth bass, I'm gonna go with a speed crawl like the one that I just dropped right there. If I go with, if I'm fishing around a little bit more largemouth, I like a brush hog. I don't know what it is, I just like the brush hog. You know, like other guys fish a lot of lizards, like that's kind of your, that's kind of the deal. Like people have always fished lizards, and a lizard is a great thing. I just don't own a lot of lizards, but I like a full-size brush hog when I'm fishing around a largemouth, although largemouth will eat that little guy too. So if you don't know what to fish, I would say throw on a speed crawl because it gets a lot of bites. But those are kind of some of the big things when it comes to the tackle. Now, the one thing that I also wanted to mention when it comes to a Carolina rig is this is not a deep or even medium water technique. You can fish a Carolina rig in shallow water. I'll never forget this. I fished a Bassmaster Open on Ross Barnett Reservoir a number of years ago, and the guy who won this tournament was fishing lily pad stems that were dead in the springtime with a Carolina rig in about 2 foot of water. And he was just dragging a lizard through those reeds, through those dead lily pad stems with a Carolina rig. And it just, again, was a way that he could work that bait quickly and efficiently through the lily pad stems while also giving them a very natural presentation. Now, over the years, I have used what's called a PD rig a lot. And to me, a PD rig it's basically the same concept as a Carolina rig. A PD rig is basically like taking a bullet weight, and then what I usually do is I just take 2 bobber stoppers and bobber stop right below that thing, and that acts kind of as like my swivel, and then it goes directly to my hook. And so usually I give myself about 1.5 foot to 2 foot leader with a PD rig, and that's what I usually fish in fairly shallow water, usually with a 1/4 ounce weight, a pretty light weight. But that allows you, again, to give those bass a natural presentation, even when they're in shallow water, something that just looks different than a Texas rig. Now, the last thing I want to talk about quickly is the speed at which you fish a Carolina rig. I believe that the best way to fish a Carolina rig is the slowest that you can fish a Carolina rig. I feel like you will get more bites on the C rig the slower that you fish it. But the nice thing about the Carolina rig is it allows you to fish pretty fast down there. Because you can use a little bit heavier weight, because you can drag it really quick, it allows you to cover a lot of water. And so I really like to fish a Carolina rig fast until I know that I'm around fish. Once I know that I'm around fish, I will drag this thing, as slow as you can, and it gets a ton of bites. So guys, don't forget to check out all your ARC stuff. Use that coupon code BFHQ to get 10% off. Also, don't forget to check out that fin fishing gear, and I will see you guys in the next video.